Hello, and welcome to the I'm So Tired podcast, where, well, usually we're so incredibly tired and we try to exercise our depression by talking about random pop culture bullshit for our entertainment, and your own if you're listening. This week, though, the reason why we're tired is way more serious and important. So we won't be talking about pop culture bullshit. That will come back next week or whenever we do a next episode. What we're actually doing this week is we are talking about the situation in Palestine. That we have already mentioned, just as a small disclaimer at the beginning of last episode. The reason why, we decided to do this episode because we feel that together, especially, we bring kind of a unique perspective to this particular issue. Islam, my co-host here, hi Islam, welcome to the podcast, by the way.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Is Palestinian, of course, as you will already know. And if you don't know this about me, I am Jewish. My background is that my family was a Jewish family on my mother's side. They lived in Germany. Kind of on the border between Germany and Poland, and they escaped in 1939. So they literally escaped from the Nazis right before the beginning of World War II, and so the final solution and all that. And they were able to luckily escape to Britain. That's only half of my family, though, because the other half actually, unfortunately, didn't make it out of Germany and Poland, and they unfortunately, we don't know exactly what happened to them because, of course, we lost contact and we don't have any information on them. But the assumption is they probably died in a Nazi concentration camp. So, as a Jewish person, I spent, and this is the reason why I wanted to talk about this as well. I will let Islam speak later, but the reason why I wanted to talk about it personally is the idea of my people, in very large brackets, doing ethnic cleansing and attacking another people in the same way that they have been attacked over, thousands of years, unfortunately, is extremely disturbing to me. And it is, honestly, it made me feel ashamed of these people, especially because in the propaganda that they've been able to sort of make the mainstream idea of what happens in Israel, they've sort of presented themselves as representing all Jewish people all over the world. And I think it's important to understand that Jewish people, as well as Palestinians, as well as any other people, aren't a monolith, and they can't be lumped into just one basic opinion. There's a large part of the Jewish population that isn't Zionist, which is the part that I belong to. And I just think it's horrible what's happening, and it's important that we acknowledge the fact that it's not true that it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel for what they're doing. In fact, in my opinion, it's quite anti-Semitic to just assume that all Jewish people are Zionist and believe in what Israel's doing. So I wanted to talk about this because I wanted to stand against what is happening. And so that's the reason. And now I'll give my friend Islam the word to kind of give us a rundown of what has been happening in Palestine, specifically in the West Bank and Gaza. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention that we are recording, as usual, live on twitch.tv/iDubai, which is Islam's channel. And this week, he is doing charity streams for medical aid for Palestine. So if you're watching live, right underneath the video, you can find a link where it says medical aid, not where it says donate, because where it says donate, you'll just be giving money to Islam. I mean, you can do that if you want as well, but if you have money, don't. If you have money to give right now, we would really appreciate it if you donated it for medical aid for Palestine and for the Palestinian people who really need it right now. We'll also be actually acknowledging chat. So if anyone in chat has questions or comments on our perspective on what is going on, we will answer them. We don't usually do that, but this week we feel like it's important to have a conversation about this because we don't really have a plan for this podcast. We're just going to have a conversation about what's going on, and we just want to stand together against it. So Islam, tell us a bit about your background as a Palestinian and sort of briefly what has been happening, because I think I'm informed, but I think you would give a better rundown of the events that have been going on for anyone who might be listening to this and maybe hasn't caught up on the news or maybe hasn't had a completely impartial view of what's going on, because unfortunately a lot of the reporting on this from Western media has been a little inaccurate, or at least sort of distant in a way that doesn't really give what the Palestinian people are going through the weight that it deserves.
It's been very much the view of it's these people that are so far away that we don't actually care about them. That's almost how the view has become right now when we discuss these kind of things, and which is why like it's also important for us to actually speak on these things and have more people speak on these things, because we cannot at this point, we're just reliant on like Middle Eastern media, and we're reliant on first-hand accounts of people actually living in the West Bank, actually living in Palestine, and actually also Gaza, and actually just living like in the Israeli areas as well. So that's also why like it's important to speak on this, because they can't be the only one talking about this. This isn't an issue that's like, yeah, this is an issue just like Hugo said, where it's just like, it's not like Jewish people versus Palestinians, or it's not that. It's not Muslims versus Jewish people. Uh, it's not a religious war. That's also like an important distinction to make. This is a war about like it, and war implies like there's like two warring factions that war each other. It's not.
It's almost difficult to talk about it without incurring in the mistake of calling it a conflict or a war, because it's so one-sided.
Well. Yeah, it's pretty one-sided. But yeah, my background first and foremost. As you said in the beginning, I'm Palestinian by ethnicity. I'm born and raised in Denmark. I've been to Palestine twice in my life, actually, as a kid. So I kind of remember some stuff like I've experienced there. I've experienced like checkpoints, for examples. Those are horrible. And I feel like the biggest thing I've experienced of like Israeli aggression was in Lebanon, where they dropped a sound bomb at one point, because where my family lived is close to the Hezbollah headquarters. So they dropped like one of those sound bombs, and sound bombs are no joke. Like they've been dropping them, like they've been dropped multiple ones in Jerusalem, and we'll get to that in a bit. But like sound bombs are basically like these. They make like this huge sound that just like makes everything shake. Windows break because of how loud the sound is. It's like it's freaking horrible. I thought I was gonna die. I remember like I was
and you see the videos, and the videos don't do it justice, because you can't really understand how horrible it can be.
Oh yeah, the videos don't do it justice at all. Like I remember, like me, 13 years old, had my PlayStation with me. I was playing Kingdom Hearts, and then suddenly an explosion happened, and I thought like, oh, I'm gonna die. Like that was like the first instinct in my head was like, this is how I'm gonna die. I'm gonna get bombed now. Thankfully, and I didn't get bombed. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But yeah, that was like one of my like first like unhanded, not first, but like one of many experiences that I've had in my life that kind of informed on me how and which like techniques that are being used and employed by the IDF. So background wise, otherwise from my family, my father, may he rest in peace, was born in Palestine before the state of Israel. He was born in 44 What is it? He was old. He was very old, and like he remembers very little because they were part of the was now known as the Nakba or the catastrophe, which is the Palestinian exodus after 1948 when the Zionists declared the state of Israel and went into the Israeli-Arab War. They started killing Palestinians, and a lot of Palestinians fled their homes, lost their homes, and that's when like Jewish immigrants from America, from Europe started moving in as a consequence of, for example, World War II. I could have been like that. Could have easily been Hugo's family, for that matter, who have been one of those who have moved and gotten home. Thankfully, they didn't.
No,
Uh,
yeah. Thankfully, my family chose not to.
chose not to.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, the Nakba, as I was saying, yes, and that's why like when my that's for example when my family lost their home, because they had like this beautiful home out by the city of the town, should I say, rather, of Tarshiha, which is now known as Malot Tarshiha, I believe. It's been fused together with another town or something. And like this town is like filled with hill. It's like a bunch of hilltops almost, and hilltops and trees. Like it's very like foresty. And yeah, my family were farmers. And the house, like big open house. And I've seen it. I've seen it. We drove there, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is where the Dubai family used to be before the Nakba, and they lost their home, and now they were told like, oh, now settlers are living here instead." Uh, which was like kind of weird for me as a kid seeing that, because for me looking at this house, I remember feel like resentment and anger, because like as I don't know, on one hand, like if the Nakba never happened, and I wouldn't probably never have been born, because circumstances like the butterfly
Yeah.
effect. But that being
Sure.
said, like I kept looking at thinking like my family ended up like my dad ended up in refugee camps, and he grew up in the refugee camp in Lebanon, and I've been there. Like I've slept in the bed my dad slept in, and my dad told me he's like, oh yeah, I used to share this bed with my brothers, and it used to be like 3 4 brothers sleeping in the same bed. Like that's how small the the house or apartment, whatever you want to call it, in the refugee camp was. So that was just like for me it's just such an eye opener of how much my family actually have lost. Like I think a lot of people take for granted the whole idea of like owning land, what that actually entails, and and what that means. And I'm not just like talk about generational wealth or whatever. I'm just talking about the fact that you just lost your home,
Yeah.
and you're now actually in a place where you're different,
With no
uh,
fault of your own as
with no
well.
fault of your own. So
And
my
it's like,
dad.
and
Oh,
I,
sorry.
and I'm sure it for you it was an experience because you grew up in Denmark,
Yeah,
and maybe if you hadn't gone back, you wouldn't realize the severity of what your family had to go through because you would just be like, oh, we have a decent life here in Denmark,
yeah.
so maybe this is
But
fine.
also,
We
like for
wouldn't
me,
worry about it.
my decent life in Denmark, though, I grew up in like one of the most like notorious ghettos in Denmark, which is where my family lived.
Mm.
I grew up like with Palestinians, with Somalis, with Vietnamese people, with like
Mm.
like I had the most diverse friend group growing up. It was almost like an American TV show where there's like, oh, there's the Asian person, there's the black person, there's the Arab person. Like it was very diverse. And I feel like meeting people from different walks of life that way also like helped me realize also like the differences between us, because a Vietnamese person will always be a Vietnamese person, and the thing I mean by that is like, I mean, yeah, America went in tried to destabilize them, failed for once,
Yeah.
and but there's still like you don't look at a Vietnamese person and go, no, 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 you're not Vietnamese, you're Korean or whatever. You don't say that, but you
Hmm.
do that with Palestinians, and that's like the thing of identity as well. Like the Palestinian identity is something I'm fighting for still to this day today. And that's something I feel like other people don't understand. Like, could you imagine, Hugo, if people started saying shit like, "Oh, oh, they do," but still, they do it in jest, but they say like, "Oh, Italy doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Italians are different." We say it in jest. Could you imagine if that was like real? Like
Yeah.
people
No, I
saying
can't.
Italy. Exactly, because you're like, it does. I'm Italian. You're
Or
right. You're
it's
Italian. You're right there.
and like even if it's not only that, but it's also just being lumped in with, oh, you're Arabic, generic Arabic. There's no
Yeah,
specificity to you being Palestinian.
that's the
That's
thing.
where it gets lost.
Exactly, because it's almost yeah, because it would be like, no, you're not. You're European,
Yeah.
which is like an insane thing to say to someone when you think about it. But no, Palestinians have like been denied their existence, their identity, which is also crazy when you think about. I talked about. So I was on Dollar Slice podcast.
Yeah.
I keep
Shout
I
out.
keep want to, yeah. Shout out to Dollar Slice. Shout out to 61 Indie. Shout out to Kyle specifically, because he's the one that interviewed me and all that.
Yeah. He
What a
did a
great
great
guy.
job, by the way. He's
Yeah,
he's a fantastic host.
yeah. And I feel like I'm gonna go like I go way over more like the history of all of this
No, it's
uh,
fine.
in
It's
that
it's
podcast,
important
but
for
I'm gonna do
people
it
to
here
really
as well.
understand
But I
that.
feel like
Yeah.
I probably won't go in as much detail as I did on that podcast because I went like
Hmm.
from before World War I to now. But
Yeah.
yeah, given that the fact that like yeah, so sorry, I lost my train of thought. I wanted to talk about like again family background still. So I was like my father and they moved to Lebanon, but my family already there like was is generation wise we've been like in ancient Palestine or historic Palestine for lots of years. Like my great grandfather, let me give you an example. My great grandfather, my father never knew him, and the reason why my father never knew him is because the Ottoman Empire, which held historic Palestine at that moment, they were part of World War I. So they sent soldiers, my great grandfather,
Mhm.
to Egypt. And the last thing we heard from my great grandfather was he crossed the Suez Canal. We
Right.
never heard from him since. But that's like another example of the fact that, oh, Palestinians exist. He was a Palestinian soldier for the Ottoman Empire. Now, we do have an inkling of what happened to him. It seems like you have to remember because the world was much smaller back then. He probably couldn't get
Sure.
back, but he settled and started a new family, apparently,
Mm.
in Egypt, in Alexandria, to be more
Right.
specific. Yeah. So, my point being, like, yeah, that's like one historic thing, that one personal thing for me that's like a concrete proof of we've existed, we've been there, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
My like yeah, so my grandparents grew up there. And thankfully, I'm so happy I got to meet my grandparents because I never met my grandfathers on both sides. They were both passed away when I was born. But I met
Right.
both of my grandmothers, and they told stories about how it was. They told stories about growing up in Tarshiha. They told stories about like the culture of being a Palestinian from Tarshiha. You know how much I love hot sauce and hot
Yeah.
chilies and stuff. Yeah, that's apparently a Tarshihani thing. So if you were from Tarshiha, you would actually dry chilies in your windows, and that was like a thing people from Tarshiha were known for. That's something I
Awesome.
still got with me, like something cultural that I still have. I don't like chili because I'm like my family were from Tarshiha. I
Hmm.
just like chili, but it's funny to me, and like it's fun to me see. Like I still have that cultural thing as well, like because my mom would always used to say, "Oh, you're such a Tarshihani," whenever I would eat chili.
Yeah. So it kind of trickles down with you, even if you're unaware of it. I mean,
Yeah, because my dad used to eat chilies all the time. He used to
yeah.
like oh, with every
So you picked
single
it up
meal.
from him without even knowing that it was,
Exactly.
from this
Yeah.
specific place where your family was from.
Exactly. And he was like, just like me, he was bad with it. He loved it. Like every time he ate, he would just do hiccups, like just like I did on that one stream where the wheel spin ended on the hot sauce. I had to pause the stream so because I had the hiccups. My point is like there's culture there. There's obviously culture there. Now, of course, this issue is also very much an effect of colonialism, which and it still is obviously it still is like this huge effect of colonialism that we've seen. Um, and it's just like not just us, like every indigenous people
Mm.
around the world have experienced uh, col- being colonized and what that has done to them. Now, some places like in the United States of America, they basically all yeah. They almost committed
Yeah.
genocide. Like there's still people left from the indigenous tribes, but we know
Yeah,
what.
but considering the original numbers, they're
Yes,
essentially gone.
considering yeah, exactly. That's my point. Or look at Australia with the Aboriginals. What
Yeah.
happened to those? And that's something we're seeing now here as well. Now the problem is, and this is where I hope like you can come in and speak onto it again, because I see Christian already said it. That was actually the point I'm working towards.
Hmm.
Christian in chat says, totally abhorrent that the conversation is turned into anti-Semitism discourse and not the humanitarian aid for Palestinians. People need to concentrate. And this is the thing that we've seen, and this is the thing I've seen time and time and time and again, is whenever we talk about Palestine, people are like, oh yeah, this is an important cause, we have to talk about it. And then you get I'm gonna get angry, I'm gonna rant. You get
Fine.
fucking Brits. I'm not gonna even call him Jewish. Brits.
Hmm.
Like Sacha Baron Cohen, who goes out, been fucking silent on all of this, goes out and say, oh well, bruv, you know, anti-Semitism. They're doing anti-Semitism now, bruv, and we should be against that. It's like, fuck you, you piece of fucking trash. And the reason why he specifically makes me so angry is the fact that he made millions demonizing an entire fucking country. And this fucking piece of garbage is gonna come here and talk to us about anti-Semitism. No! He's the last one who gets to play that card. I will not hear it. You're British. You have nothing to do what's going on in Israel and Palestine. You have nothing at stake here. These people, Hugo, are who like piss me off. Because right now, we've been going through forced eviction, ethnic displacement of people. Right now, there's the what's it called, the neighborhood in Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah, which is why this whole
Yeah.
thing started right now in the year of our Lord 2021. It's been going on for a few years, obviously, but it's come to like a
Yeah.
heated moment now, where this piece of trash settler who's from Long Island, by the way, and is a huge Trump
Yeah.
supporter. Like there were a lot of info about him that like leaked today. Huge Trump supporter, fucking racist.
There was that Vice video as well that I
Yeah,
sent you where they managed to
I
interview
haven't
him,
watched
and
it
it
yet
was,
because I need to like
dude,
mentally prepare myself
like
to watch
it's
that.
honestly it's horrifying. The guy is just like, uh, yeah, I'm here. I have an arrangement with the owner of the house. I don't really pay rent, but this is we want Jews to be here, so I'm here. And if
Yeah,
it was somebody else, they wouldn't be as accommodating. What he's saying basically is like, oh, if I didn't do it, somebody else would
yeah,
come,
somebody
but
else would come.
they wouldn't only take you home, they would also beat the shit out of you.
Yeah,
That's how he's justifying himself. So
yeah, and he's
he's,
like
yeah, just a
legitimately
garbage human.
squatting in these people's home. And has been
Yeah,
done so for years. What an insane person! Like who fucking does that? But no, I guess it's his rights or something.
yeah,
You're from Long Island. Move back.
it's insane.
Like, don't take people's
It's
home.
ridiculous.
Like, there's difference between being an immigrant and stealing
Mhm.
people's homes. There's a huge difference between those two. But I digress. We see like these, yeah, ethnic displacements. Mohammed al-Qurt and the al-Qurt family,
Mhm.
who have been fighting against this, and he's been on news media talking about how the Israeli like military police have been handling the situation. They've been tear gassing people, shooting people, and we're not even talking about Gaza at this point. We're just talking about
Yeah, this is
Jerusalem.
just the West
Uh,
Bank
this is
and
just,
East Jerusalem.
yeah, East Jerusalem. Yeah, the West Bank is just like recently they've started. So
Hmm.
afterwards, they started like attacking the Al Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan. And during Eid, they attacked the Al Aqsa Mosque, broke windows. This building is thousands of years, over 1,000 years old, not thousands, over 1,000 years old. Uh, and they attacked it, broke windows. This is a historic building. And Hugo, the thing that drives me insane, or why like I'm almost shaking while talking. And by the way, this is gonna be the tone for this podcast. I will try like
No,
do
this is fine.
a joke to get get the timbers down a bit.
It's completely understandable to be angry about this.
But
Don't
the
You don't have
thing
to
that
apologize.
drives me up the wall is the silence. But when the fucking church, what's it called? The one that burned.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame burned. People were crying on the
Yeah.
streets. Celebrities made like sent tons of money. Like, oh, where did all this money come from suddenly as well? Oh, these guys can actually, like, they've always been scumbags, the celebrities, by the way, because they have money enough to end world hunger if they wanted to. They don't,
Yeah.
but they could. And they
Mhm.
sent like all this money to Notre Dame, which is like good. I'm not saying it's not,
Yeah, it is
obviously,
good,
because
but
it's
it's just
like
the double standard that's
it's just a
absolutely
double standard.
disgusting. Yeah.
Exactly, the double standard is disgusting. And I'm just like talking from the perspective of the West. I could say the same thing about Saudi Arabia, for example. Like
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
rich oil sheikhs over there, they could have easily
Mhm. Because again,
paid and done so, but they don't. They don't care.
because it
Nobody cares. That's the thing.
because again, it's important to emphasize this is not it's not necessarily Middle East versus West, or
No.
Judeo-Christian religions versus Islam. This is not what it is. It's just that even in Arabic countries that are more well off and richer, they don't care.
They don't care.
They don't.
Exactly.
They're not. It's not like, oh, the Palestinian people don't have anywhere to go in their own country, but all the countries around them who are also Arabic are accepting all of them. That's not what's happening.
Yeah.
That's another part of it.
Which I feel like a lot of people actually forget. Like,
Yeah,
because,
they literally have nowhere to go unless they
yeah,
have the means to actually move to another country, which is what your family was able to do, for example, or other families have been able to do,
forced to do, by the way. Not just being able,
forced to do.
forced. Yeah.
But being able, but in the moment that you're being forced to leave your home, if you have the means, if you're able, you will maybe leave the country altogether. But most people don't have those means, so they're stuck there, and they can't go anywhere because nobody around them is helping. Israel is just locking them up either in the West Bank or Gaza. They are limitations to their right to movement, which is a basic human right, by the way. They have this thing with different license plates, and if you have a
Yeah.
license plate that is Jewish
Green.
or Israeli,
Yeah.
you can go wherever you want. But if you have a green license plate, which is the Palestinian license plate, there are limitations to where your car can go. So they effectively cannot leave the areas that are assigned to them, again in brackets, because it's recognized as an illegal occupation by the UN. The only reason why the UN isn't able to intervene in this situation is because the way the UN is set up, there is the UN Security Council, and the United States have a permanent seat on the Security Council, and they veto anything that goes against their Israeli ally, or more accurately, their economic interest in the region. So nobody's actually helping. There's nobody out there that is capable and trying to help these people who are stuck there.
And I feel like it's also like important to say, like, right now, for example, we're doing this charity, right? Or I'm doing this charity for
Yes.
medical aid for Palestinians. And this is great. Like, it's great to see so many have donated. Like, at the time of recording right now, we're up to $345, which is a good,
Yes.
nice amount of money. Some else, like,
By the
kind
way,
of funny.
we'll put the link to the donations in the description of the podcast as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube or on podcast services, you will find a link there. If you are able and can donate for this cause, we would really appreciate it.
Yes,
Go on, sorry for interrupting.
We would, yes. But, like, okay, so the thing also, like, it's good that people are donating. I'm not saying it's bad or anything. Please don't misunderstand me. But the thing is, in 4 years' time, Gaza's gonna get bombed again. Cause the thing is, I feel like that's the thing people keep focusing on, is these Hamas rockets. Whenever we talk about this, it always boils down to, oh, but what about Hamas? It's like the classic. There are two ways you can shut up the media, and, like, people, not even just the media, people who are either ignorant on this or just straight up evil. I'm gonna use the word evil, honestly. Straight up evil. They use two arguments. One, oh, you're being anti-Semitic,
Yeah,
which is like insane
absolutely
because
ridiculous.
I'm Semitic.
Yeah,
Palestinians are Semitic people.
we're both
Like,
Semitic. So it's
anti-Semitism.
just dumb.
Anti-Semitism is a European invention.
Yeah.
Sorry, but it's like the Europeans invented anti-Semitism, and now it's being weaponized to use against like criticism against Israel, and I fucking loathe it. Like
Yeah.
so, because see, like I'm going in 20 different tangents.
It's like saying criticizing ethnic cleansing in Rwanda is racist against black people.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. It doesn't.
It's
That's not how it
ridiculous to say
works.
that. Or, but the thing is, like, look how easily we can criticize Saudi Arabia for the treatment of women. I could
Yeah,
easily go and say that's Islamophobic, but nobody does because other
because
Arabic
it's
countries
not.
and other Arabic countries agree.
Yeah,
Lots of Arabic countries you'll see agree because it's not a monolith. Being Arab is not a monolith. You got people from Morocco, you got people from Algeria, you got people from Egypt, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria.
yeah.
We are all different.
It's almost 2 billion people. Am I correct?
Yep, sounds about right.
So it's like it's ridiculous to assume that that whole population is a monolith. And
Yeah,
another thing people do is they even when you talk about Saudi Arabia, people need to understand that within the country there are differences of opinion. Even though the ruling class is extremely sexist and weaponizes the religion as well to do horrible stuff, that doesn't mean everyone who lives there shares that opinion. It's just
exactly.
they've been submitted to what is a monarchy, so they can't have their voices heard. But that doesn't mean that every person from Saudi Arabia is, violent, sexist, and weaponizes religion in that way. It's important to understand that these are people, and there's a difference of opinion, and we can't just dehumanize them by not acknowledging that they are not a monolith.
I want to read a comment from Christian because I had a
Yes,
point and I lost it because we're going on
that's fine.
20 different tangents. The West has Christian says the West has dehumanized the Middle East for so many years. People here either don't know about the current events or don't care enough, which is insane to me. The reason why specifically Americans need to care, and I will single out the Americans for this one, is the fact that America pays $3.8 billion a year for like relief for Israel. They
It's
call it
not
like
relief.
it's
It's
infrastructure though,
specific.
right?
No, it's
It's called
specifically
infrastructure though. It's like the bill for
yes,
infrastructure, but
but it is specifically defensive aid,
yes,
which is also ironic because it's not defensive at all. It's
the fact
being
that
used
it's
to
called
bomb
the
civilians.
Israeli Defense Force is ironic, which is
It
why you see
is,
a lot of Palestinians actually call them the IOF, the
yeah,
Israeli what's it
offense, yeah,
occupation
occupation force,
force
yeah.
is what a lot of people use, because yeah, the Hamas rockets. That was what I was talking about. Sorry. Woo.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
let's go down like the timeline of events to that led up to Gaza and the ceasefire, and I use air quotes while calling it a ceasefire because it's not.
Hmm.
So we got this whole Sheikh Jarrah thing. We got Al Aqsa Mosque attacked, and also this was something I forgot to mention on Dollar Slice, but there was so much going on that I kind of forgot this very important part as well. There were little lynch mobs in the streets hunting down Palestinians. And these are civilians. And they were protected by who? The police.
Please.
Because as a Palestinian, you cannot call the police. Because the police will always side with the Israelis. Even though you are what they call an Israeli Arab. By the way, there are no Israeli Arabs who call themselves Israeli Arabs. They call themselves Palestinians, but they have an Israeli passport. Those people cannot get help from the police at all. I saw like
It's,
one.
sorry,
Sorry, yeah,
another detail to this is that this was around what the Israelis celebrate as Jerusalem Day as well, because this
exactly.
year it was around the 9th and the 10th of May. Jerusalem Day, if you don't know what it is, it sounds like a celebration. It's celebrating the day in 1967 when Jerusalem was occupied by the Israeli military. It was a war offensive against the territories that belonged to Palestine to retake, in their words, Jerusalem. So it was an illegal occupation. It was an act of war, and they celebrate it now as this big finally Jerusalem is back in the promised land of Israel. But what they do every year for this is mobs form in the streets and look for Palestinians to beat up. And this is, the police either protect them or just don't do anything about them. And this happens every year. And this was right before what would eventually happen in Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Yes. So back to So the lynch,
Yeah.
and also like during Jerusalem Day is pretty common actually to have like these mobs who go out and beat up Palestinians apparently, which is
Yeah.
something I learned this year. I didn't know that, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently it's very common that Palestinians get beat up. Like Palestinians are afraid during Jerusalem Day.
Yeah.
But
They
yeah,
hide in their homes.
yeah, they hide in their homes because like it might be taken. So as we've seen, like so lynch mobs, as I was saying, were going on. So this is the part where Hamas enters the picture. Now, Hamas is basically the operating government of Gaza.
Yes.
They're a group. I don't like to use like they in the West they call them terrorist group. They're not. They're a militant group. Yes, they're the military. They have the military arm of Hamas, for example. There's also like the governmental part of Hamas. It is effectively the government of Gaza as much as it can be a government. That's important
It
to remember. I don't.
yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I don't support Hamas. Just so you know, like they are like a fundamentalist group, and there's a lot of stuff that they say that I disagree with, like the Hamas Charter, for example, which is an argument you will hear time and time again. Nobody actually like follows the Hamas Charter though,
Mhm.
and you also have to like read it in the context of when it was written. Again, I'm
Yeah.
not defending Hamas. I'm just saying this
Oh,
part is actually the one that should be called complex, not what is going on.
mhm.
But Hamas issued an ultimatum: stop attacking the Al Aqsa Mosque, or we will fire rockets. And just like I said on the other slice part, I will say it here again. I feel like personally that's a reasonable demand to do. Stop attacking this holy site, or we will attack you. It's that simple. There's no reason for Israel to occupy the mosque. There's no reason. Yet they continued.
Well, but
No,
their reason
their
is they
reason.
say,
Yeah,
oh, but actually this hill on top of which Al-Aqsa is built is actually sacred for the Jewish religion, and we want to build a synagogue here.
yeah,
So, in the intention of the most hardcore right-wing Zionists, they would like to essentially remove Al-Aqsa Mosque, which, as you say, is what I think it's what the third most
exactly.
sacred
Yes,
uh, uh, place in the Islamic religion. They want to just kind of remove it and build a temple on it, because I guess in ancient times before Al-Aqsa Mosque was built, there was a synagogue there, which is a it's hard to even describe the ridiculousness of it. And just to give you an idea, just imagine if they were doing this, you know, uh, imagine if a group of Muslims were coming to Rome and they were saying, "Oh, we want to topple this super incredibly ancient and incredibly sacred Catholic church because we want to build a mosque here." What would the reaction from the whole world be? They would all say
right?
these people are terrorists, and they would all unanimously, um, uh, you know,
Condemn them.
attack them and condemn them, and they would send military aid to defeat them. But the double standard that you see with Al-Aqsa is blatant if you think about it in those
Yeah.
terms.
So the Hamas rockets.
Yes.
They started firing rockets, and this continued on for 10 days, where we've seen, I believe, there are 10 Israelis that lost their lives, and over 250 Palestinians, amongst them around over 60 kids,
Mm-hmm.
lost their lives. Again, it's very important to say, like, no civilians should lose their life, whether they be Israeli or Palestinian.
Of
That
course.
being, but that being said,
Which
look
is
at how
which
many.
is which I feel like is something that gets lost. It's so obvious that
Yeah,
is civilian deaths are horrible, horrifying. They should not happen on any side, anywhere.
but the fact of the
However,
matter, yeah. Oh, you can go. You go.
no,
However,
however, it's very clear that it's Israel has one of the most technologically advanced military arms in the world. They have this incredible piece of technology that is the Iron Dome that essentially intersects most of the rockets that are being sent by
Yeah.
Hamas. Rockets that are home built. They're not this high tech technology that will, destroy Israeli buildings or whatever. They just happen that some of them do eventually pass through, and they do cause casualties, which is obviously something that everyone condemns and is against. The issue is that the reaction from Israel is so disproportionate that you kind of lose sight of that, because, or at least you should if you have basic human empathy, because it's not just over 250 people dead in Gaza, but it's not just that, it's almost 90,000 people displaced who don't have a home anymore because they're just toppling buildings left and right. They're bombing hospitals. They're bombing this research center where they were 3D printing protective materials and I believe medical equipment of many different kinds. They bombed libraries. They bombed places where...
It was specifically even like the COVID relief center.
Yeah, the COVID
again,
relief center.
Reminder, there's a pandemic as well.
Yeah, they bombed the COVID relief center. They bombed this building, which was big news, where Al Jazeera and the Associated Press had their offices in Gaza. They just bombed it. And every time they bomb one of these buildings, they just say, oh, Hamas operatives were secretly using this building in the basement or whatever.
Yeah.
No proof. No proof that has been shown to the West at all. There's no... They just say it and people believe it, I guess.
And even like when you look to America,
yeah,
they don't get briefed on this. That was the thing that came up. They didn't get briefed on this at all. They get like a source. Trust me, bro. That's all they get.
Yeah,
that's the source. Just trust me.
Literally it. Yeah.
That's literally it. There are no proof at all that Hamas has operated out of any of these buildings. It's, again, even if Hamas was operating out of these buildings, let's say that underneath the Al Jazeera and Associated Press building, there's a secret base where like 5 Hamas operatives are planning whatever they're planning. Does that justify destroying a building where journalists operate out of? And also, would these journalists, who, by the way, most of the time are on Israel's side, as their official stance, they are pro-Israel, they are not against what Israel is doing, wouldn't these journalists notice that there's Hamas operatives in their fucking building? I mean, the Associated Press, it's their job. Oh, sorry, you're lagging, Hugo. Okay, Hugo just froze. What I think Hugo is trying to say, though, like the Associated Press specifically, they fired one of their journalists, Emily Wilder, and Emily Wilder, who is Jewish, by the way, has expressed her support for Palestinians. She has, in college specifically, she was even part of an organization that was pro-Palestine, and this is what happened. She got fired for it. She got fired from the Associated Press. She effectively got canceled by right-wingers in America. That's the same... Oh, sorry. It's just like I see Hugo's frozen face and it's just like distracting. Is there any way I can close him and get him to leave and come back? Okay, I'm gonna try something. Hold on. I'm gonna do this. Now it's just 2 of me. Oh my god, this is embarrassing. Hold on. I will fix this. Okay. We're doing live troubleshooting. This is gonna be part of the podcast, I guess. Well, I tried to figure out how I can get Hugo back. So now you get to see part of this. No, I'll speak on this on the same time. Now, my biggest issue right now with the media as well, and just like Christian brought it up earlier. Now, for some reason, the whole conversation is just okay. What about the rise of anti-Semitism? Now, of course, anti-Semitism is bad. Nobody is arguing against it. Like, you even see Palestinians time and time again say, "Oh, well, why is it showing me?"
Back?
Are you...
Sorry?
Oh, you're back. Okay, I don't have
I'm
to
back?
fix.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
Okay. I talked about the
Italian
Associated
internet,
Press. I explained the whole thing with Emily Wilder.
Oh, yes.
which I assume was the point you were trying to make. Like that was the building that they bombed. Like that's how
Yeah.
much like they are on the side of Israel, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, now we're here. Sorry, like it was a bit distracting to say the least, because you kind of
Yeah,
froze like
sorry, it's
mid
fine.
sentence and all
It's
that. Yeah,
the internet kind of cut out for a second.
it is what it is. It is what it is.
It's whatever. But I think the main point we were making is it first of all, there's no proof of any of the Hamas operatives that are using Palestinians as meat shields or whatever, which is what the IDF and Israel officially proclaims. But even if there was proof, does that justify displacing dozens of thousands of people and killing 200 people and 60 children? I think that is what we should be asking. Like, it should be, we can't just say, oh, Hamas operatives are there, then fine, this is all justified. That's a ridiculous take.
Yes, that's right. It's a ridiculous take. Yeah, that's the take. Oh, and I was saying that the problem is right now, just like Christian said earlier, that the media is still just focusing so much on this whole, the rise of anti-Semitism in the West. Like the rise of anti-Semitism has nothing to do with Palestine, because the people who are actually anti-Semitic hate me as well, because you guessed it, they're anti-Semitic. They're Islamophobic. They're xenophobic.
Yes.
Those are the type of persons.
They're racist.
They're racist. Now, the interesting thing is, like, when you look, though, at those racists, though, they're the same ones who like Israel. I wonder why. I wonder why they love Israel so much. Yet they're anti-Semitic. Yet they're Islamophobic. Why? Because they see that response they wish their government did. They wish their government would blow us up, kick us out of our homes here as well. That's the thing. That's the actual thing. Israel, at its core, is a racist ideology. Like Zionism is a racist ideology, because Zionism is a Jewish ethno-state. It's the same for Jews.
It is, yeah.
And nobody else is allowed into the state. Nobody else. It's racist. And the state is effectively created by Europeans and Americans. They were Jewish, yeah, but they were Americans. Like, if they trace their origins back, do you think they would trace them back to the Middle East? No. If they trace their origins, they will be from Poland.
Yeah.
They will be from Germany. And some of them, of course, immigrated to America, which makes them effectively double settlers, because their families settled in America and then settled back into Palestine. That's why we see this, because basically, if you delegitimize Israel, thank you. If you delegitimize Israel, you effectively you're effectively doing the same to, for example, Australia. You're doing the same to America, because those are built on the same principle.
But sadly. I think that's the fear that the people who protect them so much feel. However, it's just about, it's not about the past anymore. It's about the future. I think it's about, okay, every Western nation on earth has done awful, horrible things to other people.
Oh yes.
There's no getting around that, because I'm Italian. Like my country has been fascist for 20 years. And if I was alive then, they would have deported me to Poland to an extermination camp because of my Jewish heritage. Like, my own government would have picked me up, put me on a train, and killed me. We can't pretend that didn't happen, but at the same time, we have to look at the problems of today without it just fixing the Israel issue. Doesn't mean we have to question the whole of Western civilization. It just means, look, there's a problem now, and this is the issue. We have to face this single issue. Just like we did with apartheid, for example, in South Africa. It's the same exact situation. Because over there, it's not like fixing apartheid means we have to topple the United States and Britain and all the countries that already exist and that are established, and, you know, within which, not completely, but a lot of the colonialisms and issues of the past have been somewhat fixed. The problem is, look at what's going on now. Somewhat, yes. Yeah. That's why I am tentative, because of course
on somewhat.
There's a lot of things still going on. But the point is, we understand the situation, we understand the history, but we have to move forward with something that isn't just blindly accepting the Zionist propaganda and the Zionist project, because it's very clearly the same situation as apartheid. And what's the reason why we're accepting it now? And the truth probably is that apartheid wasn't accepted either by the West. And it wasn't until, grassroots movements within that country kind of gained power that they could overcome that issue. But this is never going to happen in Israel, because Israel is so overwhelmingly powerful in regards to their occupation and in regards to how they treat the Palestinian people. So unless there's some pressure from the West, I do not see how you can solve this situation. And it is on Western countries to step up at this point.
It is on Western countries, but again, as I said earlier, the thing is that Israel has weaponized probably the most powerful rhetoric there is. And it's just saying, you're being anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
You're doing what Hitler did to us. That argument is so powerful that it scares everyone. Everyone gets scared if you compare them to Hitler. That's the thing. As soon as you do that, nobody dares to do anything. And feel like weaponizing the fact that the Jewish people went against something so horrific, and then it's being used to torture Palestinians, to take them from their homes, to bomb them, for me, is probably the most anti-Semitic thing I've heard about.
It really is.
That's where... That's you being an anti-Semite.
Yeah, that's where I feel so hurt by what is going on, just on a personal level. Like, regardless of the, I'm very conscious of humanitarian issues everywhere, because it's what I do. I'm studying international relations, and it's part of what I'm interested in regardless. But my personal connection to this, and knowing that, if I went there, I could say, oh, look, I'm Jewish, can I get a home? And they would be like, sure, just take a home. And my people, again, effectively are doing ethnic cleansing. And just because it's 2021 and you can have a video of the things that are happening, and therefore there is a limit, I think, to what Israel can do, doesn't mean that it isn't as bad as when the Germans, with the idea of their living space, invaded all the countries around them. What is the difference? What is Zionism is essentially saying is, this is the Jewish living space, and it is our right from God to have this plot of land, and everybody else needs to either go away or die.
Yeah.
That is the Zionist ideal. There's no getting around. There's no rationalizing it and saying, oh, yes, but, what the Jewish people went through and all that. That is only maybe the impetus with which you found Israel in 1948, because it's in the immediate aftermath of the war, and there's all these issues. And I'm not even saying, and I'm not even advocating for the Jewish people not having their own country. I'm just saying, why does it have to be an ethno-state? Why can't it be a country where, there is a majority of people who are Jewish and people who maybe have been displaced at the time of the war? But why does it have to come at the expense of somebody else? Why can't we share the land? Why can't there be a country where everyone has equal rights? It's just absolutely insane to me.
Thing for me,
and I don't understand. And I don't understand how, from the West, you can look at this and believe that it reflects Western democratic values. Because at that point, you're just being hypocritical.
But you also have to remember that the demonization of the Middle East didn't start after, it is not a post 9/11 thing. That's also something, because...
Oh, no, it's not at all.
Because it's easier to go after 9/11 happened, then that's when we started hating the Muslims or whatever. That's not actually...
It's not true at all.
True, because it's been going on for a while. The demonization of Middle Easterners has been going on for quite some time. So having effectively what is like colonized land post sorry, I burped, post World War One, by having what's called as British Mandate Palestine, as it was called post World War One, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, you effectively have this plot of land that you can say, oh, so the Brits can go, oh, you want this plot of land? Take it, it's yours. That's also like an easy like, and also I'm gonna do it like as an oversimplification right now of how it went down, just for the sake of the podcast, because we can't go into too much detail. But basically, what you're doing is saying, okay, we've had problem with these people, and these people being the Jewish people. Here's your plot of land. Go there. It's yours. None of the problem is going. We're not gonna have another Holocaust. We're not gonna have anything else. You can migrate there. Take a house. It's yours now, and you get to live there. That for me is like very much the apex of European colonialism, because that's what Israel is. It's a European colonist project that's been allowed to exist specifically because the type of Europeans that have moved there. Because if the Jewish people wanted their own country, Germany should have paid reparations.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Palestinians are the ones that have to pay for what the Germans did. I know we just said like we don't have to look at the past and whatnot, but like the solution ended up being like, yeah, displacing another people,
Another
because
population. Yeah.
another population, and it's so easy to go. Well, they could just go to the neighboring countries. Palestinians are treated as second-rank citizens in the Middle East. They don't like Palestinians
Mm-hmm.
because because like Palestinians, like historically, we're like a country of farmers and stuff. We arrive at another country and we have to start our new lives over and over. You get all of these refugees suddenly. Like, there's a stigma to being Palestinian. Lots of
Yeah.
Egyptians don't like Palestinians. Lots of Lebanese people don't like Palestinians. Enough so that during the Lebanese civil war, Israel was part of that civil war. That's like why my family isn't in Lebanon anymore. I never actually told you this story, but like my family was this close to getting murdered by Israeli soldiers. This close in Lebanon. It
Lebanon.
was in Lebanon, yeah. And this is back in 82. Yes, this is back in 82, 1982, where as my family are like fleeing the country, because my dad was part of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, and that was just before yeah, they turned into Fatah, the party of Fatah, as they
Yes.
became known as
Which
later.
is currently
The West
the
Bank
biggest
government.
party in the West Bank, right? Yes.
Exactly, the West Bank Party, which is led by President Abbas, who is effectively the Palestinian president, but
Mm-hmm.
nobody actually likes him because one, he has obviously embezzled funds, and two, he goes with whatever the Israelis tell him to do, which is the problem. Like, so he's basically just he's a straw man, basically, which is why people don't like him.
And also, regardless of whether he's a strawman or not, he has such limited powers because uh, Palestine is not officially recognized as a
Oh yeah,
state
it's
by
occupied
Israel.
Palestinian territories.
Exactly. So
Yes.
even from an international point of view, it is the UN with a large majority recognizes Palestine as a nation that should get equal right. Like currently, the situation as it is under international law, in theory, is that there are two states.
Yeah.
But this, of
In
course,
theory.
is not true at all.
But as I was
Yeah.
saying, the story of yeah, my family. So,
Mhm.
uh, so my father, as far as I understood, like yeah, he held a lot of information, and his basically his life was on the line. Like he was a political target to be assassinated, basically. So as they were like hiding and trying to escape the country, uh, they were actually being chased by Israeli soldiers, and they had to hide at this. Like they just went into this random hotel room to hide, and the person standing there, who was like, okay, like the piccolo or whatever, the receptionist. Sorry, I was like, okay, go hide behind this table. If the soldiers come, I'll talk to them. So the soldiers come in and they ask him like, so we're chasing this family that's fleeing. Have you seen them? And he's like, no. and they're just like hiding right, like they can hear everything. And my sister, who was like newly born, she was like a baby. She almost started crying because again, baby. And my mother just put a flask in her mouth to shut her up. Like there was like not even milk in it. She just put that flask in her mouth and just like held my sister just to make sure that she didn't peep a word. And the soldiers went on. They're like, okay, we cannot hear. There's nothing here. Let's move on then. And that was like one of the last stories that they have like from Lebanon. Of course, they went back to visit. I've went with my family back to visit afterwards, but that was like one of the experiences they've had. Because again, this isn't the first time they've tried ethnic cleansing. It's been going on like even in
Oh
other
no.
countries. Like in Lebanon, the Israelis were there to shoot Palestine in the refugee camps, and the refugee camps are so cramped. Like it's so scary to me that something like these places were war zones, essentially. Uh,
In Gaza itself is essentially a refugee camp. Like
Open air
it has
prison is the word that
open air
most people
prison is the
use,
word.
but yeah,
Yes,
open air prison almost because it's a prison.
because
You cannot get in or
people
out.
aren't
Yeah.
people aren't allowed to leave. I believe it has one of the largest population densities in the world.
Yes,
Because
and also like one of
people
the
are just
lowest median age as well, because people don't
yeah.
get grow old in Gaza because there's not
No.
enough food, the water is
Yeah, I think
poisoned, the air is
I believe
polluted. It's shit. Gaza is shit
the
to live in.
the median age is 18 years old.
Yes,
So 50% plus one of the population is 18 or younger,
yes,
which tells you anytime you bomb, half the people you're bombing are children,
yeah,
literally children, and they just do so indiscriminately with no regards for essentially for basic human rights, which is the big sticking point.
exactly.
This is a Western, by all intents and purposes, officially a Western democracy just doing human rights violations. And if it was any other country in the world that wasn't part of what we consider the West, the international community would be condemning them
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah,
Just like they condemn, Myanmar and Rwanda, and what's going on with the Armenians.
yes,
All those people are being condemned, but they're doing the exact same type of acts. And because of Israel's unique position politically, they just get to keep going on. And if you criticize them, you're an anti-Semite. I've been called an anti-Semite
yes,
for 2 weeks. Me,
yeah,
where my family literally died in the concentration camps. For 2 weeks, I've been loud about this subject on Twitter and Facebook and wherever I could. And I've had people just saying I'm a self-hating Jew or an anti-Semite. That's the length that the Zionist propaganda
I think that's so like
gets you to.
insane when you think about that part specifically. Also, it's like me going through Twitter. I see so many Jewish people speaking up for
Yeah,
Palestinians, being
there's a lot
like,
of them.
yeah, and they're using that the saying, never again about the Holocaust,
Yeah,
and it's like,
absolutely.
and I've seen Jewish people say, never again doesn't mean we're gonna do it to somebody else. Never again means never again. Period.
Yes.
We cannot start like yeah, but no, never again apparently just means for the Jewish people and everybody else can get fucked. But I'm seeing the support from Jewish people, and for me, like that's so important because
It is.
the narrative right now is still it's anti-Semitic to speak against Israel. Like even fucking Mark Ruffalo, because one of the first thing Christian wrote in chat was, "Let's shit on Mark Ruffalo today." And you know what? Let's shit a bit on Mark Ruffalo because that was a disappointment, but not a surprising one though. Because Mark Ruffalo has been out like swinging, being like, yeah, they're committing genocide. They've been doing this for a while. And Mark Ruffalo was like one of the few people who spoke against Israel even back in 2014. Last time they bombed and they killed so many people back then as well. And
Yeah.
again,
Oh,
comparatively, almost no
actually a
is
lot more.
actually a lot more. Yeah, it
Actually a
was
lot
even
more, but
was
there
way
was
more
no,
bloody. Yeah.
yeah, there was no support at that point.
Yeah. There was
I
way more
think
support this time around as well.
I think the difference this time is post George Floyd, post the BLM movement. There's more of a social consciousness on human rights violations, and the internet has for once been used for good in spreading the word. The family that you cited at the beginning, he what's his name? I forget his name. I mean, yes, I don't want to mispronounce, but he's just this, he's 22 years old.
22 years old. He's just a young
he's just
man,
a 22-year-old kid who, through his Instagram, raised awareness for millions of people to see what was going on.
He's
and
a writer and
that's
a poet.
the difference now.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference now compared to 2014.
Yeah.
Although,
like,
at the end of the day, there's not much of a difference.
There's not much of a difference, but I do think it is way easier to, like, social media has become way bigger than even back in 2014. We have so many different forms of media. And at the same time, like, look at Facebook and Instagram. They've been, like, legitimately censoring posts that have anything to do with Palestine or whatnot. And the way they did it, apparently, they were like, oh, it was a bug. We didn't know. But if you said anything about Al-Aqsa Mosque, it was labeled as a terrorist organization. What in the fucking ethnic cleansing does that mean? Did you seriously label a mosque as a terrorist organization?
Because that's
Zuckerberg,
the justification.
you piece of garbage human being. Sorry. I'm going to call so many people pieces of garbage on this,
but he is.
on the
like,
show
honestly,
today. What a piece of garbage human being.
I think it's because it was some sort of association that happened on the internet, because the Israeli propaganda was the Al-Aqsa Mosque was being used by Hamas again to organize suicide bombings or whatever they were saying. And if you look at the videos, it's very clear it was just people praying on the most sacred day of the year for the Muslim religion.
Yeah.
It was very clearly just people praying peacefully.
Very clearly, just people praying.
Back to Mark Ruffalo, though.
Back to Mark Ruffalo, exactly. Thank you. So, lately, he was, like, very much on the defensive, and then suddenly, today, he tweeted out, well, actually, I'm gonna walk back on some of my comments, because it's inflammatory towards Israel, and the Israel-Hamas situation is way more, complex than I thought, and so basically just, like, backtracked on everything. And people, the funny thing, I went through his comments, and the people I see that are most angry are Jewish people, because they're like, what are you talking about? It's not anti-Semitic to talk against war crimes. One of the war crimes I forgot to mention, actually, in Gaza, they used white phosphorus on civilians. You're not allowed to use white phosphorus on a standing army, and they use that on civilians. That's how much, like, the reach of their war crimes go. Do not, whoever out there is still going, but the Hamas is using human shields. First of all, like Hugo so expertly put earlier, it's so dense in Gaza. Like, you cannot, like, there's no way for you to hide. Like, Hamas, no matter where they are, they're going to be civilians surrounding them. Because Hamas, again, isn't an army. It's militias from Gaza.
And, like, Gaza, it's important to understand that there's 2 million people there. And
2-point-something million,
It's half the size. It's like, I think it's 1/3 of the size of London or something like that. It's a small strip of land.
It's extremely small. Like, Gaza is so small. People are living neck to neck in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. So it would be absolutely impossible. Like, of course, Hamas is operating with civilian next to them, because that's the space that they have.
Yeah,
it would be impossible for Hamas to do anything without civilians being around, because there's civilians everywhere.
Defeating Hamas is so fucking simple. It's like Hamas is the most simple militia to fight against.
Yeah,
you don't fight them.
Yeah,
you don't fight them. You don't bomb them. That's it.
The moment Israel says we're just going to use the Iron Dome, we're not going to retaliate, Hamas is instantly discredited.
Yeah.
Both in the eyes of the West and in the eyes of the Palestinians. Because the Palestinians at that point is like, oh, why are we firing rockets if they're just defending themselves? At
Exactly.
this point, if they're just defending themselves, it means that they are more open to dialogue and trying to find a peaceful solution to these issues. And there's no point in us firing rockets if they are not retaliating and they're not on the offensive. But they are on the offensive. And so even though you can't condone what Hamas is doing and what Hamas is to a certain extent, because there is a more militant side and less militant sides to Hamas. There's also a side to Hamas who just helps rebuild in the region, and they're the only people who have any means to do it. But of course you condemn the more militant, more fundamentalist side of Hamas. But how do you not understand from an outsider's point of view that if your country is being ethnically cleansed, occupied, you're being displaced from your home, buildings are being toppled with bombs for 70 years, how do you not understand the feeling of anger that leads you to want to fight back? That doesn't mean that fighting back and killing civilians is just, is the correct way to go about it. But what else are you going to do?
And like, look at...
That's what I don't understand. Of course you condemn Hamas, but please understand the desperation of these people that leads them to become radicalized.
That's the thing. They're desperate. They have nobody speaking for them. Nobody. No government is speaking for them out there. None. And if they do, like every time, like for example, when the UN tried to pass like shit, should we force Israel and Hamas into a ceasefire, got vetoed. Immediately vetoed.
Of course.
And Joe Biden, fucking good old sleepy Joe, sleeping his way through all of this, fucking signed a deal to sell weapons up towards what was $700 million or something worth of military equipment.
And also, like, Trump did some horrible stuff. Like, he moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv, which is the official capital of Israel, to Jerusalem, which is what Israel says is the capital of what Israel says is the capital of Israel, even though Jerusalem, under international law, is actually divided because it is sacred ground for different religions. So it's divided up into sectors, and it's supposed to be kind of an internationally owned city that belongs to different groups because it is sacred for every Abrahamic religion, essentially.
Which also means that the fact that the Israeli military police are operating in Jerusalem, Eastern Jerusalem,
is literally illegal.
It's literally illegal.
Yeah,
they caught them in 4K that they're doing this.
And it's not like what they're doing is illegal. Just the fact that they are present there is illegal. Is an occupation. It's not legal by international law. But Trump moved the embassy there. But keep this in mind. The deal that leads to the current agreement between the United States and Israel, by which the United States sends $3.8 billion a year in, again, as we said, defensive, under brackets, aid to Israel, was done under the Obama administration.
Yeah.
So it's not a Republican versus Democrat issue. No. It's America has accepted Israel in this way, and it's essentially a bipartisan support.
Exactly. Because there are only like four American politicians that are against this. Bernie Sanders.
Certainly only four that have.
And even he tiptoes. Bernie Sanders, AOC.
Only people who have visibility. There's only four of them. Yes.
Yeah, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar.
Ilhan Omar, yeah.
And again, Bernie tiptoes.
Bernie is what he said is we must stop aid to Israel and we must fight for the end of violence against civilians on any side. So he was, he's saying, yes, we need to stop giving money, but he is the most centrist on this. Because to be fair, he is also...
I respect the shit out of him. Because
he's an 80-year-old...
so low.
Yeah, he's also an 80-year-old Jewish American.
Who's lived in Israel, by the way, as well.
Exactly. So there's like the fact that he's even there is already way more progressive than most people are.
Yeah. Yes. Fucking insane.
Yeah. we we are losing our train of thought a lot, but
Yeah,
it's just because
there's
again,
so much to talk about actually. That's the thing, and we could go on for hours even.
yes, I
Um,
just
yeah,
if you have anything more to say, say it. But it, just to conclude, what my thoughts are
yeah,
is I want to um thank you for kind of giving me the together we're using your Twitch platform at the end of the day, and even though we're speaking to a few people, I want to thank you to for giving me and you and together to have the opportunity to talk about this, because again, I I strongly feel for this because it's my people doing it, and I think it's important that the West and Jewish people in the West specifically speak out against ethnic cleansing, because it's what has been happening to us for thousands of years. And the idea that we would be doing it to another people is abhorrent. And we need to stand up against it. It's essential that we do it. Because, of course, Islam, the Palestinian guy, is going to be against ethnic cleansing in Palestine. But it's not because he's Palestinian. It's not just because he's Palestinian. It's because it's a fundamental violation of human rights, and everyone should just unanimously be against it. And any platform that you have that gives you an opportunity to speak against it, you should absolutely use it. So again, thanks for anyone who's listening to for giving us the opportunity to talk about this.
yeah. And on my end, I feel like if there's anything I would like to end like as a conclusive note is, as I said in the beginning, being a Palestinian, I feel like the most difficult part is like constantly have to validate your own existence. I think that for me is the most difficult part, even though like historically there's so much proof that Palestinians have existed, and even like one of the founders of Israel, Golda Meir, who was also one of the first and only female prime minister of Israel, even she even said, "I'm a Palestinian." She used those words, "I'm a Palestinian." She had a Palestinian passport, she says. Like, even she acknowledges the fact that Palestinians were there. This is an uphill battle. It's always been an uphill battle, and it's always been a battle that I wish more people would look towards, because it's only something that we can get through in one way or another if there's sufficient pressure on Israel. And this is on Israel, not on the Palestinians. The Palestinians have nothing. They live in literal prisons. In the West Bank, even, like, it's not a life. It's not a life. Yet they're still living. They're still holding on. And I've been talking about this, like, privately with you, for example, Hugo, that I sometimes feel like just me, like, having fun doing streams, playing video games, reading comic books, whatever. I kind of feel bad because I'm like, my people are going through literal hell, and yet I'm almost taking my life here for granted up here. For me, at least, I really wish that whatever it is, that force that's seeping into people and sowing doubts into their minds would just disappear. I wish people like Sacha Baron Cohen would stop fucking talking and derail this conversation towards what it's actually about. And then I just really just wish that, yeah, that we will see like a united front that will stand together for Palestinians. Because at the end of the day, um, Palestinians need reparations after this, uh, and Palestinians need a plot of land to live in that's actually theirs. I don't know what form that will take. I've said it before that I honestly don't even see a two-state solution as a solution that would work, because they would still be fighting over land. I see a solution that is we have one country with equal rights for people, with reparations paid back to Palestinians. Give Palestinians their land back. I'm not just saying throw out the Jews or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying a country that's not
No, you
founding on
share
the,
it.
but share it, and not like a country that's based on the ideology of Zionism, of racism, uh, But that also means that people need to be more aware of what's going on. People need to speak up regardless, and that also means, and I hate to say this, but that also means that I need to see more of of the Jewish people speak up against this, because that has also created a big difference this time around. And like I almost like I legitimately felt, I don't know if people could see it when you were talking about how much like this also meant to you, and seeing the support coming from you, Hugo, it means a lot. And seeing the support from my friends and seeing people actually speak up, that's how low the bar is set for Palestinians. That the fact that you just say, "Huh, this is bad," is
Mhm.
that's how low the bar is right now. Because Palestinians are dying, we're dying, we're losing our identity, we're losing everything, and nobody's doing anything about it. And for once this time around, it's as if Israel is slowly losing the narrative, and I cannot tell you what's different. I just hope this continues, and I just hope, for the love of God or whatever it is you believe in, there's hope at the end of the tunnel. And I don't know if it's just the Palestinian resilience in me that's talking, but there's hope. So I'll just gonna end this by saying, from the river to the sea, one day Palestine will be free. Hugo, do you want to end the podcast?
Yes. Um, well, I'll just remind everyone, if you're watching live, please, if you can, if you're able to, click on the link for Medical Aid for Palestine, donate. If you can, obviously, we don't, you know, it's as important as it is. We said it is more symbolic than it is anything else, because if things don't change, they will bomb again in 4 years. But for now, the Palestinians do need that medical aid because they bombed the fucking hospitals. Um, we'll put the link in the description of the podcast if you're listening to this on a podcast service or on YouTube. And thank you if you've listened to this, and if you're going to share it and let people know that, a Jew and a Palestinian can talk about this and be on the same page completely. It's important. I honestly believe that it's important. It should show you that this situation is not complicated, as a lot of people are trying to say. But yeah, subscribe to the podcast if you want, I guess. It's a weird segue, but we usually talk about random crap. Last time we talked about Cyberpunk. Next time we'll see what we'll talk about. Maybe something a little lighter,
I will
hopefully.
probably
If
talk a lot on Final Fantasy 14, so if you want to hear my
Yeah,
thoughts on that
Islam
MMO.
is going insane on Final Fantasy 14, so maybe we'll talk about that. So if you enjoy that, if you enjoy our thoughts on dumb shit, they will come back soon. In the meantime, please donate if you can. Subscribe. Let us know what you think if you have any comments or whatever. And thank you again. If you've listened to this, you're awesome. We love you. Thank you. And say it with me, everyone.
I'm so
I'm so
tired.
tired of human rights violations.